Um, Now, the purpose of this session is to make that functionality you have done accessible through the web browser, accessible through the web. So when we have some functionality that we can remotely call from the web, we call this functionality Web API, Web Application Programming Interface. So this is the purpose of this session. So before we move forward, we first need to understand what the web is. So in a very high level, in a very abstract way, how can we describe the web? What is the web? At the end of the day, what is it? Okay, very good. So there are some servers, computer networks that are networked. Okay, and then very good. So these servers they are hosting some content. These content could be images, it could be videos, it could be text, it could be documents. So we have servers or nodes on the network, on the internet, and these nodes are running some web server, and this server is hosting some content. And this content could be different type of content. So this generic name for content on the web, we call it a resource. So at the end of the day, the web is nothing but a set of resources. For example, an image is a resource, a video is a resource, a document is a resource, a particular page is a resource. Yes? So the web, at the end of the day, is made up of resources, and these resources are hosted on servers. Now, every resource on the web must have what? An address, a URL. Every resource on the web has a URL, every resource. So for example, the QU homepage definitely has a URL. What is the URL of QU homepage? www.qu.edu.qa. Yeah? So this is the homepage. This homepage itself is made up of many resources. For example, this logo here is a resource and it has its own address. So this is an address. This is the address of QU logo. So every resource is a resource. Sorry, every resource has a unique URL, and we access this resource by knowing. We must know the URL. If we don't know it, we have to search Google to find the URL of the resource. Without the URL, we cannot access the resource. Yes? Another important thing, when we access a resource, although the browser removes it, we put this thing here. I'm sure you have seen it. We put this HTTP : / and then we put the URL. What this HTTP is? The browser will generate an HTTP request. It's a protocol. What do we mean by this protocol? What is it?
So they agree to communicate between the website.
Very good. So it's the format of communication between the client and the server. The client being here, the browser, and the server is QU server in this case. So if the client wants to send some request to the server, it needs to do it in a particular way. And the server should respond in a particular way. This particular way of the request, how the request should be formed or should be formatted, and how the server should respond, we call it a protocol. Yes? Even in our human communication, we have a protocol of communication. It's not written, but we learn it through social behaviors and social conduct. So for example, if I want to borrow your pen, I will not just come and say, give me that pen. It would be very rude, yes? So there is some kind of protocol. How would I request your pen, for example? Can I please borrow your pen, for example? So there is some kind of protocol. Yeah? And then the response, here you are, whatever. You see here. Of course, in the human communication, we know the protocol only when we break it. When we break the protocol, then we know that there is a protocol that has been broken. But in the machine-to-machine communication, there must be a protocol. Otherwise, I cannot just go to any server I never knew, I never had any conversation with this server in the past. How can I ask it to do things for me if we don't have a well-defined, agreed-upon protocol? So that's why people sit together and they define this protocol that drive the web and that change the world, the very simple, powerful protocol that we call it HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Yes? So this protocol is critical to understand for us as developers. You cannot call yourself a web developer if you do not understand how HTTP protocol works. It is a must. It's a fundamental concept that you must be familiar with. So because you have a lab, I'm not going to go into the kind of the conceptual aspects. I want to drive it more practical, and inshallah, I'll give you the chance to practice this in the lab. And when we come back in the next session, I will explain more the conceptual aspect. But for now, all I want you to keep in mind that the web is made up of resources. And these resources have URLs. And we access these resources using HTTP protocol. This is the key messages I want you to keep in mind. Now, what this HTTP protocol is. So let me show you. If I go here and inspect and go to network, and then just refresh this page, you can see here what the browser is doing is generating an HTTP request. An HTTP request has certain format that the request has to follow. Why do we have this standard format? So the server can make sense of it. And the server must respond in a specific format. Why does it need to respond in a standard format? For the client to make sense of the response. So that's why we need the HTTP protocol. So the way it works, the HTTP protocol is super simple. All it does, here it is. If the web browser or the client, the web clients in general, wants to access a resource, to get a particular resource, all it does, it sends an HTTP verb, in this case a get verb, followed by the URL of the resource. So if I want the server to send me a particular resource, I'm not going to say to server, please send me this resource, give me this resource, min fadlik a'tayni this resource. I cannot say so. I must use the get verb, cannot use any other verb. Who told us to use this verb? The HTTP protocol. If you want to talk to this server, you must use HTTP protocol, which means if you want to get a particular resource, which verb should you use? Get. Space followed by the URL of what you want to get. Very super simple. How the server should respond? If the resource is found and everything is fine, the server should respond with this code, 200 OK, a new line, and then the content that you requested. If what you requested, does not exist, then what you will get? 404 not found. I'm sure you have seen this in the web. 404 not found. You cannot say, I didn't find it, come back later. Server cannot say whatever it wishes. It must respond in a standard way. Why this is required? To be understandable by any browser, for example, by any client. Yes, that's basically the idea of HTTP protocol. It is clear? Yeah. So now, as developers, when we are developing a web API, we basically need to understand HTTP protocol and teach the server how to respond to requests. So a web API is nothing but requests will be coming to our server using HTTP protocol, And us as developers, we have to handle these incoming requests. So we need to learn how to build a web server that is able to receive HTTP requests and respond using HTTP protocol. That's what a web API is, or a web server. So web server is a program that runs on the server, and what is its job? Is to listen to incoming requests, make sense of them, and respond accordingly. Yes? So to build a web server, there are many ways of doing so. And you can use any language, Java, C++, C Sharp, Python, and you name it. But in this course, what will we be using to build our web server? JavaScript, because we just want to learn one language on the client side, on the server side, and it's a very popular choice. That's why we choose this path. Now, to do this, to use JavaScript to build a web server and to build a web API, we can, of course, start from scratch, but we don't need to start from scratch. There are libraries that help us to do this. One of such libraries is Express. So if I go here and look up npmjs.com, you know this is a repository of open source packages. People create modules and packages and post them here, and people can download them and make use of them. One of such very popular package is Express package. And how do we know it is very popular? Just this week, 7.5 million kind of downloads. Yeah. Of course, you will be adding more in your lab, more downloads. Okay, so the way you do it, you just go ahead and do npm install Express, and then you have this library. And super easy, you can build a web server in few lines of code. That's exactly what we will be doing in this session, and that's what you will be doing in the lab. So let's get started. So what I will I'll do here, I'll build one from scratch together and start from there. So I will just create an app. And the first thing I will do is I will require the Express library. I already installed it using npm install Express, and then I require it. So all I'll do here, I'll do Express equal require. You are familiar with this, yes? I require this library. Then I create this app equal Express. I'm creating a web app. And basically, I'll get this app to start listening to some port. Remember, a web application or a web server is a program that is running on the server and listening on a particular port. So all the web servers that we visit every day, they are listening to a port. The common port used is port 80. That's why we don't need to put the port. But really, there is a port there. If I put it, the browser will be laughing and it will throw it away because most of the servers listen on port 80. In my case, I want to listen on another port, app.listen. And here, I will listen to port. Let me just put it nicely here in a number, in a variable, const. And ports, let's say I want to listen on ports 5000, for example. Yeah. So basically, the app, I'll ask the app, go ahead and start listening on this port. Once you start listening, I want you to run this function. Once the server is started, I want you to display this to the user, to say to the user, console.log, app is running at http://localhost:/ and then basically I will put here $ports, and I'll be using the backtick. Explain it a little bit further. Yep. Yes, you can see here I am asking, I imported this Express library to make my life easier to build a web server, create an instance of it, and then start listening. So now the server is up and running and listening on this port. but it's not able to handle any requests. It's still not no. It listens. It receives this request, but it's not able to respond. We have to teach now. We have to teach the app how to handle these requests. If somebody comes using the GET request, come to this URL slash, we teach it what to do. Yes? Okay, so how do we teach the app how to handle the requests? We create what is known as routes. So I will say here app. I'm telling the app, if somebody comes to you using a GET request, yes, and they came to this path, this is the callback I want you to run. This is basically the programming model, how I program my app. In here, basically, this is I'm making my app understand HTTP. I'm telling the app, if somebody comes to you using the GET request, and they came to you asking for this path slash, this is what I want you to run. Now, Express automatically makes available two very important parameters automatically provided. One is called the request object, and the other one is the response object. So the request object, you use it to read the incoming parameters from the user, and the response, you use it to send the response. So for example, if somebody came to this URL, all I will do, I will go to the response object and I will say send, and I will send them this string. So if I rerun this rerun my server, go back there, and basically I will get this. So if I look in here, inspect and go to networking, and refresh this, you will see. Okay, let me just. Let me just rerun this. Okay, and rerun this one to show you exactly what's going on. Okay, can you see here? So this is what the browser did. The browser generated a GET request, and it sent it to this URL, localhost/5000, and the server responded by a 200 OK. Yeah, and it gives us this content, which is, in our case, was Salamu Alaikum. You get the idea. That's basically what's going on here. So let me summarize. If you understand this, that's it. You understand how to build web API or a web server. So what I'm doing here, I'm importing the Express library because it makes our life easier to build a web API. Then creating an instance of app, then getting the app to start listening on port 5000. Okay, so people will visit that URL and start sending us requests. How they will start sending us requests? Using HTTP protocol. So the request will be either, in this case, a GET request to a particular URL. And then for each URL in my app, I need to provide a route handler. I need to teach the app what to do for each of the URLs my application supports. Is clear so far? Let me make it a bit clearer by giving you another example. So in here, let's say I want to ask the server to give me the time on the server. So I go to this URL called /time. If I go there, the server does not know how to handle this. So what should we do to get the server to handle this request? Create a route, okay? So, and associate it with the app. So all I do, I copy this again, come here, and basically, in this case, what will be the route? /time. And then what I will do here, I will get the date and time of the server and send it to the client. All I do, I will say here const datetime equal new date, and then take this variable here and send it back to the requester. Rerun my server, refresh, and I get the date and time. That's basically how it works. So my app is nothing but a set of URLs These URLs on the server side, for each URL of my app, I must have a route handler. That's it. This is what a web API is. Yes? Okay, so now let me show you a more realistic example. Now, of course, in the handler, in the route handler, here your imagination is the limit. You have the full programming language. You do whatever you wish. You go to a database. You do some complex computation. You call another service. It's up to you. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. So let me show you a little bit more realistic example. So in here, I have a repository similar to a repository you created in Lab 6. Let me show you an example of this repository, how it is used. So if I run this repository, I test it, I can get all the heroes, and this is the list of heroes I'm getting, or I can get a particular hero. Like, for example, hero 1, it gives me one object, which is this one. So what I did here, I created a repository, I tested it. In here, nothing to do with the web. It's plain JavaScript running on the console. And this is what you did in Lab 6, yes? What I want to do now, I want to be able to call this functionality and make it accessible through the web. I can go through the web browser and get this functionality, the result of this functionality displayed on my browser. Which means I will be creating a web API to make this functionality accessible through the web. So the first thing I need to do, I need to decide a URL for this functionality. So what do you think? What could be the URL for this functionality? /heroes. The server is saying, I don't know how to handle its route. The developer did not teach me how to do it. So this is our role as developers, how to handle this route. What should we do? What should we do is basically we create another route, yes? So let me copy this just to make life easier. And then which route are we handling? Heroes. And what I'll be doing here, the functionality to handle this route is already implemented. I'm not going to re-implement it here. Where is it already implemented? In the Heroes repository. I already implemented it. I already tested it. It works perfect. All I want to do now is to call it and send the result to the requester. Yeah. So to call it, to be able to call this repository, what I need to do is I need to require it first. I need to import it in my app. So I will import it here. I will call it hero repo, for example. And I will do here require. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Yeah, not here. I'm supposed to be here. Thank you. So I'm supposed to be here, yes. And basically, where is it located? And the current folder and the repository subfolder under.
No, it's not here. It's above.
No, it's in here. So this is the current repository and the hero repo. Yes? And basically, this object is now stored in the hero repo object. All I need to do now, come here and call this one, .get heroes. Now I go ahead and store these in a variable called heroes. And because this one is an asynchronous, when I call it, I have to use a wait. And because I use a wait, this becomes async. You are already familiar with this. Once I get the heroes at my hand, what is left now? Send it back to the requester. How do I send it back to the requester? Res.json in this case, because this is an object. I want to serialize it to JSON and send it. Okay? That's it. If I do this, rerun my app to pick up these new changes, and I go back here, refresh, and I will get my heroes. Yeah? So that's basically what the API is. All the API is doing is making the repositories that I already created, I already tested, I make them available through the web. Is clear? Very simple programming model. It is very important not to put your logic in here. In here, the web API is just enabling remote web access to your functionality. Don't put the implementation here. Where should you put the implementation? In repositories. Test them using your console app. You don't need to test them on the web context. And then make them available through the web, through the web API. So web API is just a thin layer. It does not have any logic. It's just exposing the functionality, useful functionality from our application, exposing it to the rest of the world, to make it accessible through the web. That's what web API is doing. Now, in here, take a look at this. I'm getting all the heroes. Maybe I'm not interested in getting all of them. I just want to get the first one, a particular one. Like, for example, one that has the ID 1 or the one that has the ID 5. Yes? So my server or my web API is not able to handle this route because it does not have a route handler for this route. But notice in this route, the last part of the URL is a really what? It changes. It is what? It is a parameter. The last part of the URL in this context, it is a really parameter. Can you see here? I can change it to something else. Yes? So what I want to say here, when the server receives this request, it say, oh, you are requesting hero 1. Let me get you hero 1 and send it to you. You are requesting hero 5. Let me get you hero 5 and send it back to you. So the last part of the URL in this context is a really parameter. So let's see how we can handle this on the server. So let me create another route. And in here, it will be /ID. So this is a parameter. Because it is a parameter, what I do, in front of it, I put the colon in front of the parameter to tell Express, oh, by the way, this is a parameter. Okay? And now, instead of getting all the heroes, I will get just one particular hero. But now, how do I get the parameter that was sent by the user in the URL? Using the request. Very good. So here is request.params.id. Yeah? This will give me this parameter. Here, you can call it whatever you wish. You can call it hero ID, as long as you call it the same here. But in this context, the most common way of doing it, the conventional way of doing it, is just use ID. Okay? Once I get this one, it's now time to send it back to the requester. That's all we need to do. So I'll come back here, refresh. There is some error. Maybe I didn't restart. Okay, let me see. Okay, I'll get that particular hero. I change this one here. It changes. Change it to 3, change. So the last part is really a parameter. How do I tell the browser that this is a parameter? Sorry, how do I tell the web API that this is a parameter? By putting the colon in front of the parameter name. Yeah. In fact, I can have multiple parameters. Let me show you a small example here. Let's say we have blog posts, just as an example. Here are blog posts, and I want to get the blog posts for a particular year and for a particular month. This is how I do it, 2 parameters. And then in here, all I'm doing, I will just return this, just to show you that a parameter object, the request.param, will have the value of these 2 variables. Yeah. And by the way, this request.param Express library is doing the hard work behind the scene and making these parameters that are passed in the URL, it is making them available in this built-in object request.params. So if I restart this one, and now if I go to posts / the year 2019 and the month 3, I will get the parameters like this. Yes? I might also have another optional parameter. For example, I want to sort the result, sort by name. Sometimes we might have some optional parameters that we can pass in the context of the web. We call these parameters a query string. So usually the way we put it, we put a question mark. I'm sure you have seen this on the web. You put a question mark, name equal value. Even Google does it. Let me show you. If I go here and go to Google, Google here, and let's say if I put here Qatar University, you see here, if you look carefully, it's putting a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, I can just put Q. Can you see there? Q. Here it is. Putting a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, no, here Q. So at the end of the day, the parameter, the query parameter, or the string I'm looking for is Qatar University. It is passed to the server in the URL. After you put a question mark and then you put the name of the parameter equal the value. So if you see here, if I just put this one, I close this and put it here, it will do the trick. If for example, I'm CMU, something like this, yeah? So on the web, the URL could have parameters. We call them query parameters. You can also do the same. You can do the same in here. And in this case, if you want to access the query parameters, you can do so. Let me try. Basically, what I will do, I will create. I will explain what I'm trying to do here. No, it didn't like it. Okay, no problem. Let response equal I'll take these and I'll take request dot query. He didn't like it. Okay, no problem. Params. I'm just trying this. I'll try it first and explain it shortly. Yep. This is okay, it's not passed. Okay, the query, there's nothing passed in the query. Let me pass something now. Sort by equal name. Yeah, you can see here whatever is sent in the URL, the parameters that are sent in the URL are accessible through request.param. And whatever is sent after the question mark is available in the property query. Yeah, so two ways to send parameters to the server. Either as part of the URL, and you make these parameters are accessible in the request.param, or as a query string by putting the question mark name equal value. And those type of parameters are accessible through request.query property. Is clear? Yeah. Okay. Moving on. So far what we have seen is on the web is made up of resources. When we want to access a resource, what the browser will do, will generate a GET request. A GET followed by URL. Us as web developers on the server side, what are we writing to handle these requests? We are writing routes, or we are programming routes. So a route is nothing but association between the HTTP verb and a path, associating these two pairs with a function call. To say when the request comes with this verb for this path, this is what you should do. Okay? So 90% or even more than 90% of the web is based on GET requests. But sometimes, sometimes on the web, we fill up a form. And we fill up the form and then we submit it. So when we submit it, what the browser does, it generates a POST request, not a GET request. Yeah? So the HTTP protocol basically has verbs. The most common one is GET for getting a resource and POST for creating a resource. So for example, in here, if I want to, let's say, go back to heroes, if I want to create a new hero, all I need to do, maybe create a form, allow the user to enter the name, the code, the hero type, and then when I submit, I send a JSON object to the server, and the server will insert it in my list of heroes. Yes? Now, let's do that. But unfortunately, here in the browser, I cannot post something. I need to have a form. I need to create a HTML form, allow the user to enter what they want, and then I'll submit it to the server. Okay. First of all, let us try to build it on the server side, and then we can see how we can handle it, how we can test it on the client side. I'll show you shortly how we can test it. So let me just copy this guy here. In this case, I'm not going to handle GET. I'm going to handle POST. Yes. Now, for me to handle this POST, basically on the request, I'll be getting a hero object. From where I will be getting this hero object? From the request. And the hero object will be added to the body of the request. Yeah. And then all I am be doing, I'm going to call the repository, and in this case, which method I'll be calling? Add hero, and I pass this hero. Yeah. And if everything goes okay, I will send the status code. In the HTTP protocol, it says when you create a new object or a new resource, you should return a code called 201 created. And if you wish, you could send some text if you wish. So for example, here, hero created. Yep. So what I want to say here, if somebody come into you, I'm teaching the app and telling the app, if somebody comes to you with a POST request, come into this URL. POST request, when we send a POST request to the server, from the client side, we always say POST, followed by the URL, followed by a body of the request. What do we find in the body of the request? The object that we're trying to send to the server. So on the server side, what do we do with this body? We retrieve it from the request. In this case, what we will find in this body of the request? A hero object. And what we will do with this hero object? We will add it to our database or file, whatever it might be. And then if everything went okay, what we will do? We will send 201. Everything is fine, and the object is successfully created. It's kind of clear? Yes? Okay, so now let me quickly run this one. Now to test it, for GET request is very easy to test because I don't need to send any body of the request. The GET request does not have a body, but the POST request has a body. But the browser, I cannot post a body unless if I create a form and do some JavaScript on the client side. I'm not ready to do that yet. So luckily, we have this tool that you can download. It's called Postman. It's a very famous tool. You can see here, it's super famous. So you download it, you install it, and it looks like this. Okay, so what you do here is my verbs. There are many verbs in HTTP. The one we have seen so far is get, and this is the URL. Let me try it. If I send this, you can see here I get the heroes. Now, if I want to add a new one, let me take one of these, and I want to add it. So which verb should I use? Post. And then I go here and put the body of the request. Here's the body of the request. I don't put the ID because the ID is generated automatically on the server. And in here, I put the name, the code, the type. Thing like this. Try this. Hopefully everything will work. If something goes wrong, catch it. And what should I do with it? Response.status. The status here will be 500. Some internal error has happened. And I will send you more details about the error. This is the proper way of doing it. You try. If it works, lucky, 201. You get 201. If something goes wrong, you get 500 internal error. Okay, this is how you program it. So let me rerun this. And if I try to go into Postman and run this, you see here, 500 internal error. I go here and say console.log, and I want to see what is in this variable hero, just to make sure I received it. Take a look at this. If I rerun this and I go back here and post this again, I get the error, but this time you see here the hero is undefined. Although it is passed in the body, when I pick it up from the body, it is not there. It is not there. So the reason why, by default, the Express does not read the body. Express app does not read the body. For us to force it to read the body of the request, all we do is say app.use express.json. I will explain this. So I'm saying to the app, go ahead and read the body for me and parse it as a JSON document. Okay? So if I rerun this, now if I go back here and send this one, you can see here the hero is created and I got 201. So when you are dealing with the body of the request, you must add this line here. Okay? And this line, we call it Express middleware. I will explain this in next session. It's not very critical. For now, just take it mechanical. If you want to access the body of the request, you must add this line. So far is clear? So HTTP, this verb here gets changed the world. And more than, I can guess, more than 95% maybe of the requests on the web are GET requests. Then occasionally we might use POST request. What do we use POST request for? To create a new resource. Creating a new resource. Because when I created a new hero, is basically a resource. By the way, let's say every record in a database could be considered as a resource. For example, if you have books. Books is a collection of resources, and each book is a resource. Yes? For example, heroes. Heroes is a collection of resources, and every hero is a resource by itself. So what are we doing when we are creating API, web API? Either we are getting a collection of resources, or getting a particular resource. You see here, I'm getting a particular resource, or I could be creating a new resource, or I could be updating a new resource, or deleting a resource. These are the most common operations. They are also known as CRUD operations. Create, CRUD. Create, update, delete. Create, update, delete. So what are the corresponding HTTP verb for create? Is post. For update? put, and for delete, delete. But, so here, there is a difference between put and patch. This is the last thing, I will let you go. For put, you use it to replace. You replace a resource. And patch is you change a couple of things. That's the difference between the two.
So put is updating the whole thing, patch is updating
Specific, small little part of it. So put is replace, and patch is just modify a couple of attributes of the object.